Hey guys, I am back with part 2 of Unsolved Crimes. The 11 creepiest unsolved crimes no one can explain. Part 2. We love horror stories because they actually make us feel safe. You scare yourself with movies about ghosts specifically because nobody you know has ever been killed by one. That is why around Halloween we like to focus on the real shit. You know, the monsters that could in fact be outside your house right now. This is part 2 of our list of unsolved crimes that are creepy as hell. Part 1 is in the previous video. If you missed it, be sure to check it out. Otherwise, let us gaze into the abyss together. 7th story. Blair Adams runs across 2 countries before getting murdered in the most bizarre way imaginable. Everything about this case reads like this guy was targeted by the monster from It Follows. Seriously, not even lying. Blair Adams was an average 31-year-old Canadian construction worker who, on July 5th, 1996, suddenly withdrew all the money in his bank account, emptied his safe deposit box, grabbed everything of any value from his home that he could fit in his pockets, and made a beeline for the United States border. Unfortunately for Adams, it turns out that United States Border Patrol tends to be suspicious of young men trying to enter America alone with giant suitcases full of money, even from the Canadian side, so he was turned away. The next day, Adams quit his job and bought a plane ticket to Germany, immediately changed his mind and got a refund on the ticket, then showed up at a friend's house insisting that someone wanted to kill him. He begged his friend to smuggle him into America. When she refused, Adams got a rental car and tried again to cross the border. This time he got through, and once he was in Seattle, he bought a plane ticket to Washington District of Columbia, then drove to Knoxville, Tennessee. This is less a sightseeing route and more like the path of a man who is desperately trying to lose something that he thinks is chasing him. Maybe he was paranoid? That is all we have really got so far, right? Once in Tennessee, witnesses reported that Adams entered a gas station and complained that his car would not start. The attendant investigated and found that Adams had the wrong keys, even though he had obviously managed to drive that car to the gas station somehow. He then hitchhiked to a hotel, paid for a room, but never went to it. After handing over the money, he immediately left the hotel and never came back. Hours later, his dead body was found in a parking lot half a mile from the hotel. His pants had been removed, forcibly it looked like, and the cause of death was found to be a single apocalyptic punch to the stomach, so powerful that it ruptured his internal organs. And that is it. That is all anyone knows. To this day, nobody can explain who Blair Adams thought was after him, or who challenged this Canadian man to a final pantsless, stomach-punching contest in goddamn Knoxville. 8th story. A retired police officer uncovers a 30-year-old recording from his son's probable killer. Warning, this one involves a dead child and is one of the worst things we have ever heard. On January 12, 1984, 7-year-old Gary Grant Jr., the son of a New Jersey police detective, left his Atlantic City home and told his mother he had an appointment with someone. Given that 7-year-olds are not exactly known for their business acumen, his mother thought that was strange, but figured the kid was being silly and let him out to play with his friends. He never came back, and 2 days later, he was found bludgeoned to death with a metal pipe. The investigation soon turned to Gary's 12-year-old friend, Carl Boo Mason, who was reportedly the last person to have seen Gary alive. After an interrogation, Boo admitted to having killed Gary, and he was arrested for the crime. So far, this is all incredibly depressing, but hardly mysterious. You have seen stuff like this on the news before. Even kids can kill. The only problem was that Boo was mentally challenged, enough that he would have admitted to killing John F. Kennedy if that was the question they had asked him. The admission was ruled inadmissible. Boo was released, and the police were left without a lead, until 2 years later, when someone wrote a seeming confession on the side of a patrol car. It read, "Gary Grant's dead. I am living. Another will win on January 12th if all goes right." Thankfully, it looks like all did not go right because nobody was killed on January 12th, as far as anyone is aware. Instead, another message was written on a sidewalk saying, Gary Grant Jr. lives. I still killed him. Son of a pig officer. Payback is a motherfucker. They never tracked down whoever was leaving the messages, and the case went cold for 30 years. So was the graffiti a clue or a hoax from some person trying to taunt the father of the victim? In either case, whoever left it almost certainly deserves to get whipped in the crotch with a length of rusty log chain. Nearly 3 decades later, in December 2015, the now retired Gary Grant Sr. was going through a bunch of old evidence when he came across an audio recording from 1986. It was an anonymous caller admitting fucking responsibility for Gary's murder to a police dispatcher, which for some reason was never pursued as a lead. Warning, this is disturbing as hell.
Almost 32 years ago, 7-year-old Gary Grant Jr. was murdered right here on North California Avenue in Atlantic City. His father, a retired Atlantic City police officer, just recently discovered some audio tapes that he hopes will help crack the case. The 7-year-old had off of school on January 12, 1986, the day he went missing.
His mother, May, asked him to go out and play, and he said no because he had a meeting, and or an appointment was actually the word he used, and he never returned, and we found him on the 14th of January, 2 days later, with his head buzzed.
After over 3 decades without answers, while converting old tapes, the father discovered the following 911 call.
Police and fire.
Yes. Is it possible for me to collect the reward on my own self for the murder of Gary Grant? No, well, how's if I did it myself and I want to collect the own reward?
If you did it?
Yeah.
Well, suppose I hook you into the Detective Bureau.
No, it's okay.
I mean, that's on the...
Make sure they know it's not a crank call. You'll never be able to catch them.
Not only does this leave the father wanting answers, but it's left him with a renewed sense of hope.
You never know. One little thing might be the thing to solve this case.
The retired officer discovered a second call where a person claims a man confessed to killing Grant. After hearing both of the calls, the optimistic father hopes someone will come forward.
Come forward. It's very important to me, not only to me, but it's important to anybody else who has a child out there. You would think that, or anybody who has an unsolved crime, for that matter. If you have the information, and even though you might think it's the smallest piece of information or insignificant, contact the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office.
According to Grant, the reward is up to $17,000, and anyone with information is asked to contact the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Major Crimes Unit at 609-909-7666. I'm Kimberly Kerr for SNJ Today.
The psychopath glibly asks if he can still collect the reward for information on Gary's murder if I did the murder himself. He ends by insisting it is not a prank call and boasting that he will never be caught. The guy is not disguising his voice or anything. If investigators had that audio, who knows? Maybe it sounds like somebody they had already interviewed. Of course, it could have been a prankster. This call took place on March 8th, which would have been Gary's 10th birthday, and it occurred around the same time those cryptic messages appeared on the police car and the sidewalk. Unfortunately, due to the police's cunning investigative technique of stash an incriminating recording in a box for 3 decades, we will probably never know. 9th story. A woman disappears from a Disney cruise ship, and there are hints of a bizarre cover-up. Britisher Rebecca Coriam worked as a youth activities coordinator aboard the Disney cruise ship Wonder, which sounds like the happiest job in the world, unless you know absolutely anything about Disney or cruise ships. Coriam was seen on a security video having a distressing phone conversation on the morning of March 22, 2011, before leaving her quarters. And that is the last time anyone ever saw her. She did not show up for work that day and could not be located after a ship-wide search. That means she went overboard, though a Coast Guard search of the surrounding waters did not find a body. Now, to understand why it is a pain in the ass to find the truth about anything that happens on a cruise ship, you have to understand the weird legal gray area in which these vessels float. The investigation into Coriam's disappearance was assigned to a single police officer in Nassau, Bahamas, because that is where the ship is registered for transparently nefarious purposes, which include avoiding certain taxes and safety regulations. It is hard to be the happiest place on earth if you have to follow the rules. In other words, this cop had jurisdiction purely due to the boat having put that address on some forms to exploit tax loopholes. Sure enough, the officer spent exactly 1 day on the ship before hauling ass back to the Bahamas and never following up on the disappearance ever again. It is not like his department had reason to prioritize a case involving some British lady on the good ship Mickey Mouse. The official story was that Corium was near the railing when a rogue wave hit the ship, sending her toppling overboard. Note, there is no evidence or testimony that a rogue wave hit the boat that day. It sounds a lot like a boilerplate explanation for a cruise ship death you do not want to bother with. Wait, it gets worse. It really appears someone is trying to cover up what happened. In November of 2011, journalist John Ronson boarded the Wonder to get to the bottom of this and immediately found everyone acting suspicious as all hell. Some Disney crew members swore Corium's disappearance never happened at all because that is the answer they have to give. Other crew members recited the story of a visibly upset Rebecca going to a private crew-only pool on the deck, surrounded by a high steel wall, and intentionally climbing overboard. Disney even says they found one of her sandals by the pool, which seemed to confirm this theory, except for the fact that one of Corium's close friends insists that she never wore a pair of sandals like that in her entire time on the ship. If so, why in the hell would the cruise line lie about that? Another of her friends insists that the Disney higher-ups placed a bouquet of flowers by the crew pool after her disappearance without any explanation, which suggests that they either knew she fell overboard at that spot or wanted people to believe she did. And here's the thing, the vast majority of the crew seem to be in agreement that somewhere, someone within Disney knows exactly what happened, simply because virtually every square inch of the ship is monitored by security cameras, including the spot of Corium's alleged suicide. Members of the British Parliament have pushed for answers, suggesting that the truth is something Disney does not want out there, such as that Corium was sexually assaulted, she was last seen wearing oversized clothes that were not her own, and then murdered. But Disney insists there is no video and in fact will not even disclose the locations of their security cameras. No one has jurisdiction to force them to, because again, cruise ship. Obviously, nobody is saying Disney is going around having people killed. Saying shit like that is the kind of thing that will get you killed by Disney. But if the young woman was the victim of something that would put Disney cruises in the headlines for all the wrong reasons, well, maybe they are happy to leave it a mystery. 10th story. A man dies of an alleged overdose, and his parents receive a creepy anonymous letter. A Chilliwack, British Columbia man named Corey Sherby was found dead in his home. He was discovered on his knees in front of a sofa, his face pressed down into the cushion. There was a pool of black fluid surrounding him, which looked like dried blood. In the absence of foul play, police ruled that Sherby's likely cause of death was acute combined cocaine and ethanol intoxication. In short, they figured he had simply balled too hard. They said there were no signs of trauma. The pool of blood was, they said, the natural result of the body purging its fluids after death. Sherby's parents found this unlikely, stating that Sherby did not do drugs, to the extent that he never so much as took an aspirin. Of course, that is what everyone's parents say, but Sherby's parents also claim they found bloody footprints, which appeared to be a woman's, throughout the house, and a bloody handprint was found on his wallet, from which all the cash was missing. Also, a mysterious woman was supposedly seen at the apartment a few days earlier, who has not been identified to this day. Oh, and there was a cardboard box in the front hall scrawled with the words, "Better be a funeral home." The police say all things that can be explained. They say the bloody footprints were not there when they arrived and were probably the result of somebody being sloppy at the crime scene. And it is easy to imagine that these are simply parents in denial. There were no further leads indicating any crime, and the case remained cold for the next 3 years. In 2014, Sherby's parents received an anonymous letter, which appears to have been written on the kind of old-timey typewriter that has not been used by anyone since the last World War. It read, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Sherby, Shakespeare said, 'Hell hath no fury than a woman scorned.' That is the kind of homicide it was, a scorned woman. Those who know it was belong to too tight a group to say a word. I think your son Corey decided too late to back off and it jeopardized his well-being, his life. Sincerely, a reader of the Chilliwack Times." Part of that sounds like a crank who heard about the case in the papers, and part of it sounds like they have inside information. It would have been easy to dismiss it as the former. But then a friend of Sherbey's named Tammy Borden contacted his parents, claiming that she knew that Sherbey had been murdered over a drug deal, but she could not say who did it, or else she would be next. Well, maybe she was also a crank, or maybe even the same one who wrote the letter. We could ask her, but a few months later, she cut her finger and died of blood poisoning. Oh, okay then. To this day, Sherbey's death is still officially an overdose. And hey, maybe it was. Maybe these other tipsters did not know anything, but could not resist stirring the pot for the spiteful hell of it. Though if true, that is pretty horrifying on its own. 11th story. A college freshman vanishes from his room and is never seen again. On the night of December 10th, 1999, Michael Negrete attended a party in his University of California, Los Angeles dorm, then went and played computer games with a friend until 4 in the morning, at which point he went out into the hall to high-five his opponent. This was back in the golden days of local area network parties, before calmly re-entering his room and apparently disappearing forever into a fold in the universe. By all accounts, Negrete was a well-adjusted kid with no history of depression or drug use. He had good grades and was attending University of California, Los Angeles on a music scholarship. Also, all of his belongings, including his wallet, shoes, and keys, were still in his room, completely undisturbed. After Negrete's roommate reported his disappearance the next morning, a bloodhound traced Negrete's scent to a bus stop a few miles away, where the trail went suddenly cold. However, investigators were unable to answer why Negrete would have suddenly decided to catch a bus at 4 in the morning without saying a word to anyone, or why the driver would have let him board without the aforementioned wallet and shoes. Wait, it gets worse. The only other lead came in the form of an unidentified man in his mid-30s who was spotted in Negrete's dorm that night, wearing a shiny gray jacket with a turquoise-colored design. Now, a man in his 30s creeping around a college dorm at 4 in the morning while dressed like a rollerblader is absolutely suspicious. But police were never able to track him down. And that is it. It has been 17 years of absolutely nothing. If Negrete spontaneously ran away to start a new life, he did it without money. He never tried to access his bank accounts or contact any family or friends. If he sleepwalked into a fatal accident on the University of California, Los Angeles campus, or spontaneously decided to commit suicide, surely a body would have turned up. He could not have gotten far with no transportation and no shoes. That would seem to leave murder as the only remaining possibility. But if Negrete had enemies or a secret life, absolutely no one had ever seen even the slightest hint of it. If he was abducted from the dorm by force, no one heard or saw anything, and no evidence of a struggle or a break-in was left behind. Sure, it was in the wee hours of the morning, but this was a dorm full of college students. Somebody would have seen or heard something. The kid played some games, said goodnight to his friend, headed to his dorm, then disappeared into thin air. 0 witnesses, then or after. No corpse, no credible tips, no physical evidence tossed down the trash chute. Nobody saying they picked up a hitchhiker in his pajamas. Nothing. And it is not like he went missing in the 19th century London, when records were sloppy, no one owned cameras, and common folk could disappear by moving 2 blocks away. This guy vanished the same year Will Smith won a Grammy for Getting Jiggy With It. The only lesson here is that, even today, any one of us can spontaneously disappear. Thank you for watching this video to the end. Be sure to watch the first part if you haven't already. And don't forget to write in the comments what you think about these creepy and mystical unsolved crimes. And also be sure to subscribe to our channel not to miss new super interesting videos, and I advise you to watch our other videos.